everybody, and welcome once again to Time Out with Kevin Gallagher. It's a pleasure to have you here. Hey, at the news desk, in front of the telephone, we got a great guest for you, and guest is in Texas this week, and we have him on next week as well. Of course, I'm Kevin Gallagher. You're watching the TV version of Time Out with Kevin Gallagher, and let's see, you can watch this program every Friday night at 8:30 p.m., every Monday morning at 11 a.m., and there's also a radio version of this program, 2 hours on a Tuesday night, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern. And I'm looking awfully dark on this screen. I hope, there we go. That's much better, guys. You can actually see me now. And I'm heard on 3 radio networks, and those networks are These Changing Times Radio Network, RevelationRadioNetwork.org, and a new one that we just got onto that's out of Scotland, and that is No Borders Radio. So you can check that out when you get the chance. With me is Jim Marrs. Now, if you haven't heard of Jim Marrs, you're familiar with some of his work. I'm holding in my hand the film by Oliver Stone, JFK. I happen to have the director's cut here, which is, if you're going to go out and see the movie, I always recommend the director's cut. He wrote the screenplay to this film, which is based on a book that he wrote called Crossfire, and he has an updated edition of that book coming out, which I know Jim used as the basis for the movie. If you ever see the movie, this is one of my all-time favorite films ever. And a book that I'm holding here in my hand called Rule by Secrecy. I've given away, and I was telling Jim before we aired, I've given away maybe about 30 copies of this book over the years. It is a book I highly recommend for people to read, your library, whatever. Read this book. It's fantastic. Jim Marrs, I want to thank you so much for being here on the program tonight, and welcome. How are you?
Hey, Kevin, it's a delight to be with you, and I'm doing tolerably.
You're doing wonderful, huh? Hey, how did you, we're going to really talk a lot tonight about the Kennedy assassination. Of course, this movie that I'm holding in my hand here is about that. One other thing I did not add is that, if my memory is correct me if I'm wrong, but you taught a course at the University of Texas out of Arlington about the JFK assassination for like 30 years, correct?
That's correct. I finally retired after 30 years in 2007. I figured if they hadn't got it after 30 years, I might as well give it up.
Yeah. How did you first get involved in researching the Kennedy assassination?
Well, it kind of evolved. At the time of the assassination, I was a sophomore at the University of North Texas, going for a degree in journalism. I had already been visiting in Dallas, and my roommates were from Dallas, and I'd worked in Dallas, so I kind of knew. I was originally from Fort Worth, but I knew the area. I had even met Jack Ruby in the fall of '64, less than a year after the assassination. I interviewed General Edmund Walker, who himself was one of the suspects, and I knew what was going on there. So when the assassination happened, I immediately gathered up all the local newspapers and the extra editions and started keeping a file on, everything that was going on, because I knew it was a very important news story. I think the thing that originally kind of got my interest was the very day of the assassination. I was watching television and watching all the interviews with people that were in Dealey Plaza, and unanimously, I bet I've interviewed more than 100 people that were there, and they all say the same thing, that there was one shot, a pause, and then 2 shots very close together, kind of a bam, 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 okay? Well, everybody said that, including former House Speaker Jim Wright, who was riding the motorcade, Senator Ralph Yarborough, he was there riding with Lyndon Johnson, and they've all told me the same thing. Well, I heard that from witnesses that day, and being in Texas and having bolt-action rifles of my own, having been deer hunting, I knew that you can't get a bang-bang with a bolt-action rifle.
Yeah, you can't do it.
Cock the bolt and pull the trigger, not to mention regaining your sight picture. So, it should have been a bang, 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 but I didn't, the government said, hey, one guy did it, old bolt-action rifle. Yeah, I'm going, well, okay. And then on Sunday morning, I'm watching TV, and as they haul this suspect out, handcuffed, spread eagle between 2 policeman, and I've never seen anybody in that position, and I was a police reporter for more than a dozen years. And when you handcuff somebody, you handcuff their hands behind them, or you handcuff their hands in front of them. You don't handcuff one cop to one side and one to another cop to the other side and walk them spread-eagled, through a crowd.
Wow.
Jack Ruby steps out and shoots him in the gut. And, of course, at that point, they're saying, oh, no, the lone nut got shot by another lone nut in the basement of the police station. I just went, wait a minute.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not right about this. But I didn't really have anything to put in its place until about 68, 69, when by that time I was already working full-time as a news reporter for the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. And every time I go to Dallas to do a story, and once I got that story out of the way, I'd ask city, county, police officials. I'd say, "Hey, what can you tell me about the Kennedy assassination?" And Kevin, it's interesting because these big old cigar-chomping, rough police captains and assistant chiefs and stuff, and they'd turn white and they'd almost crawl under their desk. And even for a young shaved-tail reporter, I'm going, wait a minute, something's not right here. If it was one lone nut, what are they afraid of?
Yeah, exactly.
Why are they talking? And and then when Garrison came up with his prosecution of Clay Shaw in New Orleans, and it came out that Oswald was down there posing, handing out pro-Castro literature and posing as a pro-communist, pro-Castro person, and yet the people he was actually in contact with in New Orleans were CIA-backed anti-Castro types. And so I'm going, wait a minute, some kind of game's going on here. But again, I had really nothing solid to say, well, the government says there's nothing here. Finally, in the fall of 1972, when James McCord, one of the Watergate burglars, finally fessed up and said, okay, we were actually working for the committee to reelect the president, which was the Richard Nixon's committee. And then at that point, it became obvious that Richard Nixon, who kept claiming he didn't know anything about it, was lying. And so, bingo, there's a moment of epiphany when I realized the President of the United States has and will and can lie to us.
Right.
Well, then everything starts coming together, okay? And it was in 76 that I began teaching my course on the assassination of President Kennedy. And in fact, going back a year, and I believe it was 75, I wrote a front-page article that ran for a whole page inside full of the evidence, and my lead and the headline said, if the new proposed House Committee on Assassinations really does their job, they will find that a coup d'etat took place in this country with the complicity of certain federal officials. Whoa, that was 1975.
That was 1975. You said that, huh?
Yeah.
Wow. Now, let me just stop you for a moment for people who are sitting there scratching their heads and going, "What? Wait a minute. You're saying that the Kennedy assassination was a coup d'etat." Explain that some more for the benefit of the people watching at home or watching on YouTube right now.
Okay. All right. Well, coup d'etat is a French term, and it simply means the overthrow of a government or an administration or a regime through a violent act. Okay. Well, that's definitely what happened here. You had the violent act, Kennedy was shot, and then you had a change of government. They tried to act like everything was the same, but it wasn't. Two very critical points that changed dramatically was the war in Vietnam. In October of '63, Kennedy had issued National Security Action Memorandum 263, which said he agreed with the McNamara report, which had stated that we would be able to disengage our military and our advisors from Vietnam by the end of 1965. He said, and in this same memo, he says, make no public announcement, but begin the withdrawal of 1,000 military people. He was starting to cut back, and I guarantee you, I don't believe he ever would have allowed ground combat troops in Vietnam. He did, because of political pressures, increase our advisors over there from the time he took office to the fall of '63, but then he ordered that we begin withdrawing people, okay? And then, of course, after he's assassinated, that less than 2 days later, Johnson issues National Security Action Memorandum 273 that essentially blocks Kennedy's pullout order, reverses the whole thing, said drop battle plans against Laos, It started the whole impetus for the war there, and of course several months later, in August of '64, we had the phony Gulf of Tonkin incident.
And that's now been proven to be a complete fraud.
Hey, even U.S. News and World Report called it the phony battle that started a war.
Yeah.
It's totally phony. And it was after that he began to introduce ground combat troops and the bombing of North Vietnam, and that's when the Vietnam War actually took off. Okay, so the Vietnam War may not have ever happened if Kennedy had lived, but it definitely happened after he was killed. The other big change was that the very morning of the assassination, Kennedy's brother Robert Kennedy, who was Attorney General of the United States, met with his organized crime task force, which had been bringing intense heat on the mafia and busting the big mafia dons, you know. In fact, prior to their arrival in Washington as President and Attorney General, other people such as J. Edgar Hoover, head of the FBI, had maintained there was no such thing as the mafia. It was only after the Kennedy administration came in that they brought Joe Valachi to Washington to testify, and it all began to come out about what inroads organized crime was making in this country.
Now, Jim, let me stop you for...
the assassination...
Yeah, but let me stop you for a second.
Organized crime task force never met again.
Yeah, the thing, I believe the term conspiracy theory comes from those hearings where J. Edgar Hoover had said that if you believe that there's organized crime in this country, that's a conspiracy theory. Is that correct?
Probably so. Actually, I think the real negativity towards the term conspiracy theory came after the Kennedy assassination, when there are some CIA documents that went out to all of their operatives all around the world and said, anybody who's questioning the Kennedy assassination, be sure and just paint them with the idea that it's just a conspiracy theory. Okay? Well, now, let me tell you something, by the way. They say, based on the supposition that one of the shots passed through a tree without hitting anything and then struck Kennedy in the back of the neck, even though the wound was in his back, according to the autopsy. He coursed through his neck, then struck Governor Connally, shattered his fifth rib, exited his right chest, entered his right wrist, shattering that heavy, dense wrist bone, and then ended up in his left thigh, and then emerged absolutely pristine, as they called it, without a mark, and was found on a stretcher at Parkland Hospital, but cannot be conclusively connected to Kennedy.
And we have right now the image...
an assassin theory. It was just a theory.
It was just a theory. Now, what's interesting is we have the image of the actual X-ray of Governor Connally's wrist, and you can see the the bullet fragments inside the wrist. And it says the X-ray of Governor John Connally's right wrist shows bright spots, which are metal fragments from a bullet. There are more bits of metal still in his wrist and leg than missing from the bullet Commission Exhibit 399 left. And you can see that bullet that was the exhibit. The government claimed that this is the bullet that caused the wound. Often called the magic bullet, this slug reportedly passed through Kennedy before striking Connally, shattering a rib and his wrist bone before lodging in his left thigh. A total of 7 wounds to 2 men. The small indentation is where the FBI chipped off a piece for spectrographic analysis. So you have a pristine bullet.
Hey, the results of the spectrographic analysis, of which they have not yet ever made public.
Figures.
But J. Edgar Hoover said that trying to compare spectrographic analysis analyzes the composition of the metal, and if it can be matched exactly, bullet fragments, for example, then you can say it came from the same ammunition. So the idea was to check these fragments that they took out of Connally's body and see if they, composition-wise, that they matched the ammunition Oswald had. Well, to the Warren Commission, J. Edgar Hoover said, well, they're similar, okay, in a letter, but the actual thing has never been made public. In fact, there's indications that there were differences. If there's differences, it means 2 different types of ammunition. Because saying the fragments are similar is kind of like saying the woman is a little bit pregnant.
Yeah, just a little bit. We have a photo I want to get up on the air right now. If you could get that composite that has the 3 images of Dealey Plaza. Yes, that's the one. We're showing the picture that shows the flash with the red circle around it, and then on the right-hand side, Jim, is the one that shows how the image of the shooter from the grassy knoll has been taken out of that. I guess that's been done with computer technology.
I'm assuming that you're talking about the Mormon photograph?
Yes, and it has the picture outlining, showing the flash of the gun. It looks like somebody that's been dressed as a cop, and then you have circled on a guy's arm. It shows like the patch of a... Yeah.
Well, it's great to explain this to your radio audience. Mary Mormon was standing on the south side of Elm Street and took a picture with a Polaroid. Mm-hmm. And what we find in a blow-up is what, to me, is pretty obviously the figure of a man with his arms in the classic rifle-firing position.
Right.
You can see his hairline, his left ear, and his eyes. And he's wearing a very dark shirt with something bright and shiny on the left chest and a semicircular patch on the shoulder, which is exactly what we see the configuration of a Dallas police uniform.
Wow.
And then there's just a bright spot in front of his face, which would either be smoke or perhaps flash from a rifle. Here is a photograph of the grassy knoll gunman firing. Now, let's look at this. If this was any other case, and I said, okay, they've got a photograph showing a man firing a rifle from behind the fence on the grassy knoll. The majority of people in that end of the plaza said the shots came from behind the picket fence on the grassy knoll. The acoustical studies, 2 separate acoustical studies by sound scientists, said within a 96, 98% accuracy that there was at least one shot from behind the picket fence on the grassy knoll. You know,
wow.
If I tried to tell people there was nobody back there, they'd call me an idiot, okay? Huh. But this is the Kennedy assassination, and despite all of this evidence, photographic evidence, acoustical evidence, eyewitness evidence, they still say, no, there was nobody back there.
Right,
and
right.
if you say there is, then you're the idiot. You know?
Right, and you're the conspiracy theorist. But what we're looking at here is basically, well, not basically, what we're looking at here is the murderer of JFK.
That's right, because the shot that actually killed him, now he was hit in the back, apparently hit in the throat, an entrance wound, according to all the doctors and medical people at Parkland. So there's 2 shots, and then hit twice in the right side of the head. But the second shot that entered his right temple area, and he had his head bent to the side. He was kind of bending over, sagging to his left front. And so the bullet entered his right temple area and blew out the right rear portion of his head. And that's been all doctored up because in the Zapruder film, you just see a very dark patch on the back of his head. And in the autopsy photographs, it's all been doctored, and it shows the back of his head intact, so they can argue that he was shot from the back. However, in the Zapruder film, you clearly see him thrown to the left rear. Simple physics tells you equal and opposite reaction, that if he was knocked to the left rear, then he was hit from the right front. Okay. Also, the photograph, the Floyd Reeby who took the autopsy photographs, have said the ones they're showing us now are fakes,
right?
Not the ones he took. That's not a conspiracy theorist. That's the guy who took the autopsy photographs.
Wow, they actually faked the photos.
In my edition of Crossfire, you're going to find that I have 11 Hollywood film and video experts who have studied certain frames of the Zapruder film, and they say that that black spot on the back of his head is a crudely painted-in black area. It's a fake. It's the film's been doctored.
So, what is overall your opinion of?
And that gets to the whole basic problem with the Kennedy assassination is: Do you believe the evidence the government presents, which can be called into question right down the line, or do you accept their evidence, in which case then you accept the idea that Oswald acted alone?
Right.
If the evidence is bad, phony, doesn't work, then you have to consider that something else was going on.
Well, what is your overall opinion of the Zapruder film?
Well, like I said, it can't be trusted.
Yeah, it can't be.
We've known for years that 6 frames are missing out of it. Just about the time Kennedy drops out of sight behind the Stemmons Freeway sign. Now, early on, when the Time Life said, "Well, that was just a mistake. We lost those frames trying to process the film."
Yeah, right. Why?
Okay.
Yeah. You have.
I always thought that they took those frames out because it compresses the time frame so that they can try to make the idea that the same bullet that hit Kennedy hit Connally. So they can make that work. But now I know since 2009, I believe, I was interviewed by Japanese television network, and they managed to get hold of a copy of the Zapruder film that did not have the 6 missing frames. It had the frames in there. And then they found from another person the same film with these 6 frames. They had them analyzed by computer experts in Britain and in Poland. And what it is, the reason they took out those frames is because it's very clear that a bullet hit the Stemmons Freeway sign.
Wow.
As Roy Skelton and other witnesses said that a bullet hit the sign. The sign was taken down within a week or so of the assassination and never seen again. And the State Highway Department, which is in charge of highway signs, said they didn't take it down and they don't know what happened to it.
And it just kind of shazam, it disappeared.
Unaccounted for.
Yeah, it just disappeared, right? It just got up and walked away. That's unbelievable.
And yet there was a TV show on one of the local TV channels within a few weeks of assassination on one time on the nightly news where they did mention that the sign had been taken down because it had a bullet hole in it, and they didn't want to be reminding everybody of the assassination.
Wow.
Whoops. That is destruction of evidence.
Yes, it is.
Which in connection to a homicide is a punishable, jailable offense.
Yeah, kind of like what they did with the towers on 9/11, just scooping everything out of there and bringing it to the Fresh Kills landfill.
Exactly.
They were destroying all the evidence of the biggest crime of the 21st century.
That's right. Just like the front door of the Branch Davidian home down in Waco, which probably could have proved what bullets went in, what bullets came out.
Yeah.
But it was turned over to the FBI, and they say they never got it, and we don't know what happened.
We don't know, and we don't know where it went.
Evidence.
Hey, I got about 5 minutes left with you. What would you like to get out on the air about this subject that we haven't touched on yet?
Oh, there is so much to
I know.
But I'll tell you what, it's all going to be in my new updated expanded version of Crossfire, The Plot to Kill Kennedy, which is being shipped to bookstores as we speak.
Yep, and you can get more information about that. Yep, you can get more information about that, I'm sure, at your website.
Right.
Yeah,
Mars.com.
Yeah, the book itself, it's real thick. It's a great read. I love your writing style because you can get through several pages, 20, 30 pages, and realize, oh, wow, I've just read 20, 30 pages. It's easy reading, but it's not simple. You got a nice flow. You connect all the information together well, and it just keeps you wanting more. At least that's what happens when I read any of your books, such as this one here, or some of the other ones like Alien Agenda. What I've always found fascinating, though, is that as the decades have gone by, more and more people are believing that the elements of the government had a hand in the Kennedy assassination, whereas if you look, back, at the late 60s, that certainly wasn't the case.
Well, that's absolutely right, and it's a correct view because what you can prove, in fact, I'll name 2 men who are guilty in the Kennedy assassination, and that's his successor, Lyndon Baines Johnson, and his next-door neighbor and old buddy, FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. Now, can I prove that those 2 men orchestrated or ordered the assassination? No, but what I can prove, beyond any reasonable shadow of a doubt, is that both of those men took actions to block and thwart any truthful investigation into the assassination, which makes them, under our legal system, accessories after the fact. Which under our system of law makes them as guilty as the person who pulled the trigger.
Right, which means that at that time could have put them in the gas chamber or the electric chair.
Exactly. We've executed people in Texas as accessories after the fact, who the facts of the case show did not do the actual killing, but they were part of it and they didn't turn anybody in, so they were accessories, and we've executed them because they're just as guilty as the killer.
Right. That's really amazing, to think about. And now, after all this time, I mean, the JFK assassination is easily the most witnessed murder in the world, in probably world history, and yet we're still battling over things like who actually killed him, et cetera, because the one thing that I know for sure in my own heart is that Oswald definitely didn't do it, and I had seen a photograph that I'd come across maybe 2 or 3 years ago where somebody had looked at outside the book depository. This person would be standing there, and it would be as the motorcade was going by, and if you look at the style of shirt and everything that Oswald was wearing, it's identical, and it looks just like him, and it's the same type of shirt and jacket.
Well, you're talking about the Alkins photograph, and I'll tell you, I spent a lot of time with Marguerite Oswald, Lee's mother.
Yeah.
She swore up and down that was her son standing in the doorway of the book depository as Kennedy passed by and was already being fired upon.
It seems to me, though, could he have been Oswald like a double agent where he was actually trying to stop the murder?
There is some very intriguing evidence to suggest that, and what is undisputable is that in the weeks and months leading up to the assassination, Oswald was being impersonated.
Wow.
Hey, there was at least 2 Oswalds running around.
Incredible.
And if anybody is doubting that, go back and look at the FBI document from 1960. That's 3 years before the assassination and even before Kennedy took office. And it's J. Edgar Hoover is alerting the State Department Security Division that an imposter may be using Lee Harvey Oswald's birth
That's incredible. Hey, we got to go. We're out of time. Folks, I thank you so much.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Yeah, well, don't go anywhere yet. Thank you so much for joining me here on the program. Time Out with Kevin Gallagher. We'll be back next week. Thank you. Bye-bye.